I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's the author
Um,
of Servants of the Moon and Sun series, no other than Mr. Joel Flanagan-Grannemann.
it's me. How are you doing today?
I'm great, mister. And as usual, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Joel Flanagan-Grannemann. I'm the author of the Servants of the Moon and Sun series. It's a epic fantasy retelling of Sleeping Beauty. The idea is, what if Maleficent was Aurora's mother, and what if she wasn't really evil? That's where the whole idea started, and I've just gone from there. I got 3 books on Amazon right now, and I'm working on the 4th and 5th book right now.
Yes, looking forward to that, Mr. Joel. So, can you give our listeners a brief overview of what inspired you to write it?
As I said, it came from that idea of, what if Maleficent was Aurora's mother. We were on a vacation in Myrtle Beach in 2019, and we watched the movie Maleficent. And because we were going on a cruise in a couple months where we were going to see the next movie, so we wanted to watch the first movie. And it was a good movie. It wasn't bad. The special effects were really good, but there was such a mother-daughter relationship between Aurora and Maleficent, and they were going for a fairy godmother type of relationship. But it struck me as the credits rolled, this would be a better movie if that Maleficent was actually her mother. So I took that idea and I went to bed and I started thinking about it, and I thought about it half asleep all night, woke up in the morning and started writing just a brief synopsis of the characters and the situations and the world, and I've just gone from there. And then I started writing, and I wrote the 2 books together. The first book being Talia, Heir to the Fairy Realm, and the second book, Talia, On the Shore of the Sea. Wrote those together, and then when I finished, about in March of 2020, I turned it over to my wife, and we started editing it. We discovered it was too long for one book, so we split it into two, and that's you know that's part of this. That's the basic beginning of it, and I've just been working on the next
Yes.
books ever since.
Yes. As we said, looking forward for the fourth book and the fifth book.
Yep.
What was the writing process like for Servants of the Moon series? Did you face any significant challenges along the way?
A lot of the challenges were finding time to write. I work full time in retail, so coming home, so I write when I come home, I write on the weekends, I write sometimes when I get up in the morning or at work. On my lunch break, I think about stories and character when I'm working. I think about stories and character when I'm, sitting around the house on drives. It's I'm always thinking about characters. I'm always thinking about what's the next chapter, what's the next situation, what's the next problem, what's the next solve to that problem. So I it's re, it's it seems simple, but that's what I do, and I write the characters. I know who the characters are, basically, and I start from there. I know where they start. I know where they're going to end, but the middle part, that's the interesting part. That's where I find, I know there's usually I have road marks in the story, but that can change too as I write. So it is a very fluid. I'm very much a discovery writer. I'm discovering the story and the characters as I write it. So, and that's where I go. And some people don't like that. They do more outline, but it's really fun. It's really inspiring to me to be able to take these characters, put them in a situation, and see how they react.
Very well said, Mr. Joel. So, how did you come up with the title of your series, Servants of the Moon and Sun? And
Well,
what does signify?
it's significant because that's what the fairies call themselves. They say that they are the servants of the moon and sun because the moon and the sun have very prominent fixtures in their cosmology, and it's the symbol of the sun rises and sets every day, so there's a cycle to the world. The moon, starts as nothing, then goes through its quarters, and then comes the full moon, and then gradually um, wanes. So it shows them that there's this cycle to the world, and it's also part of their religion that they believe in reincarnation. That when they die, their spirit will find a new body, and it's the whole cycle of their world, the whole cycle of the realm. That's what that really means is that, and they are servants of the moon and sun, and that's what they tell each other. That's part of their that's part of their religion. So that's how that series title came about.
Very well said, Mr. Joel. So, can you describe the main characters or themes in the Servants of the Moon series?
Well, the two books focus on Talia. She's the heir to the fairy realm. Her mother is the queen of the fairy realm, and it starts out with her becoming, excuse me, it starts out with her meeting the heir to the human realm, who is Bastille, and how they're put together as sort of a way to, because the fairies and the humans have been fighting for centuries, both actively and kind of in a Cold War type of thing. Uneasy peace, as I've described it other places. And so both the heirs are being brought together as a way to possibly have an alliance, have children together, have bring the human and the fairy realms closer together to forge a lasting peace. And that's what Talia really wants. That's what Bastille thinks he wants, but there are forces on either side, from the fairies and from the humans, that don't want them to succeed. So that's what the first book is really about, Talia and Bastille's first relationship, and the fallout from when things go bad on either side, that forces are arrayed against them, both fairy and human, to drive them apart and to drive the human and the fairy realms back to war, because that's what some part people want on both sides.
Did you draw from any personal experiences when crafting the story or characters?
Crafting the characters, that's a good question. For a couple of my villains, especially one villain that appears kind of midway through the first book, I kind of took inspiration from an old store manager I had. She was she was a horrible person, and that reflects in the horrible characters that I created. And
Okay.
I mean, so she was she was somebody who would make the trains run on time. And I say that very, very knowing exactly what that phrase can mean. That she really cared about the store. She really cared about making money. She didn't exactly care about the people and how they got it done. So a lot of the villains have a piece of her in them. And but then a lot of my characters also come from personal experience, from things I've experienced, things I've witnessed with my family, with my friends, um, just little things. Sometimes it's with my coworkers, and sometimes if you keep your eyes open and you really pay attention to what's going on around you, anything can be an inspiration. Sometimes it's just as simple as an overheard conversation behind you in line, that somebody will say something like, "Wait a minute, I can do something with that," or I can make a character, or I can make a something about it. So it's really that's where I get a lot of my inspiration, is from these little things that happen around you. And I also get inspiration from everything I've read, all the greats of literature, Tolkien and all of that. I don't think anybody can write fantasy without being influenced at least a little bit by Tolkien, because he looms so large in the fantasy realm. So
Very well said, Mr. Joel. So, what do you hope readers take away from your book after they finish reading it?
I hope they're entertained. That's what you want to do. You want to entertain people, but you also want to make them think and make them feel and be emotionally invested in these characters, because I love my characters and I want people that read them to love them too, and to hate to love the good characters and to hate the bad characters, and to wince when my characters make bad decisions, and to just to find parts of themselves in these characters, because not only can you not only do I write from my personal experience, I hope that people can, you know, put themselves into these characters' shoes and figure and see, oh, Talia handled this situation really good. I think maybe if I had the similar situation, I could handle it that way too. So it's just one of those things that you want people to love your characters, to be enthralled in your story, and it's, that's what I want. I also want people to think and to look at these characters and say, well, they they're they're living their lives and they're figuring out how to live with the troubles they have in their lives. So maybe I can take a little inspiration from that.
Very well said, Mr. Joel. But before we go on, I want to shout out to the people listening in my ranking tops in the last 30 days, because in Bhutan, I got six. I got number six on the Apple chart. Taiwan at 34, Jamaica 42, Cameroon at 59, Cambodia at 66, Thailand at 60, 97, South Africa 115, and a lot more. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world like Mr. Joel. So, Mr. Joel, can you share a memorable moment from your writing journey that had a significant impact on the series?
Significant moment. I think it was, I had some trouble. There's a point in book two where I had characters, they were in a place and I needed they were at one point in the story. I needed them to get to this other point. They would get how in the middle, how they would get through that middle part. And I was just originally the idea, when I kind of wrote the outline for the story, the original idea was that Talia's aunts, who are the villains in the story, would steal Aurora and take her and raise her. And but as I wrote the story and I realized how bad the ants were, that there was no way they could raise Aurora and keep themselves secret for the 16 years. So I had to change that. So I had to figure that out. And I had this character who I created when I was writing in high school, and he was this wanderer with this secret, and I realized that, oh, I can pull him into this story, and he's going to become Aurora's father figure. He's going to adopt Aurora, and he's going to take her to the exile forest. And when I realized that I could pull Kanan into this story, it turned on so many lights in my head, turned on so many ideas that I could take this character and I could do so much with him. So that was one of the key moments when I realized, oh, I have a way to get my characters from point A to point C, and what B is going to be in the middle. So that's it.
So, Mr. Joel, how important was research in creating the world of context of Servants of the Moon and Sun?
I really didn't do a lot of I don't do, I didn't really do a lot of research, because my characters are all in my head, and a lot of the magic I know because I've taken a lot of inspiration from other authors and how they do their magic system, and it's a lot of ceremonial magic. It's a lot of telekinesis, teleportation. So it's basically, I know a lot of this stuff, and the research can really comes in me sitting down and thinking about these characters and how they're going to react, how they're going to go from point A to point B to point C, and how they and just how they how they live their lives, and creating this world, creating the fairy realm, creating the human realm, creating the Elon towns, which are the places where a lot of the half fairies live that live in this area between the two realms. And just figuring that out. And there are little things that I've researched, like plant names and weaponry and all these sort of things that come up as I'm writing, and I realize, oh, I don't know how a catapult works, so I have to figure out how a catapult works. I know the basics of it. I just need to figure out how it works, how the what all the pieces are called, so I can not be dumb to my readers, that real than readers who know more about these things, that read it and say, oh, that doesn't work that way. So it's the little things a lot that I have to research.
Indeed, Mr. Joel. So, what message or lesson, if any, would you like your book to impart to the readers?
I think it's never too late to do what you love. I wrote all through college and high school, but I stopped when I graduated from college just because life got in the way, and it was always a source of depression for me. And when I got this idea in 2019 and actually started writing, as I was in the right place in my life to follow through with all these ideas. I'd had ideas before, which I never followed through with them. I never really wrote any of them down. They just kind of rattled around in my head until until I forgot them or put them aside. So I'm 50. I just turned 51 now. It's never too late to write. It's never too late to do what you love, because the only person standing in your way is you. And taking that leap of faith, figuring out what you want to do, and sitting down and writing, making the time, cutting out things in your life that maybe aren't that important. That watching this TV show isn't that great. You're not really watching it. You're just sitting there on your phone. You could take that time and you could be reading. You could be writing. You could be doing something else and figuring out what are the important things in your life. And that's what I've been doing these last couple years, is figuring out what's important and what I want to do and what needs to be done.
Yes, be productive, people. Think
Yeah.
something that you will make your legacy a symbolism for your generations to come. So, Mr. Joel, is there a specific scene or chapter in the book that holds special meaning to you for all the series?
I think the chapter I'm most the two actually it's two chapters that I'm most proud of. It happens in book two. It's it's after a really bad thing happens. A tragic attack happens to Talia and her ladies, and it's the repercussions of this. And the chapter starts out with a couple characters leaving this refuge they've gone to, doing something, and coming back. And then the second chapter starts with the people who are left behind in the refuge and what happens to them. And then Talia and her group return, and it's everything that happens, that the two chapters mesh together so well. And you realize what's going on, and how then the chapter progresses with all of them coming together. And it's I don't remember. I think the first chapter is called Land's End, or no, excuse me, Realm's End. I named it after Land's End. Realm's End, and then going into a chapter called Repercussions, which is probably one of the most powerful emotional chapters I've ever written, because of everything that happens. That pretty much everything that everybody's been holding back for the past couple chapters comes crashing in and down on them, and they discover things. And it's one of those chapters that gets me teary-eyed every time I think about it, because of everything that happens. So those are the two chapters I'm most proud of.
Very well said, Mr. Joel. So, can you tell us about a symbolisms or hidden layers in your book that readers may not immediately notice?
There's a lot of symbolism, especially in the colors, purple and green, which is my wife's and I wedding colors. There's a lot of purple and green in the fairy realm. A lot of the symbolism is not very hidden. It's very obvious. There's a lot of classism and sexism and and a lot of isms in this world based on, for example, the fairy. There's three types of fairies: the iridescent winged fairies, feather winged fairies, and leather winged fairies. And they divide them. Society divides up by those classes because your iridescents are the nobles, feather wings are middle class, and most of the leather wings are soldiers. And there's a lot of there's some, no, not distrust between the wings, but it's a very caste divided society. And then there's the relationship between all the half fairies that are in the world, and the full fairies don't see them. They're kind of indifferent to them, or they see them as servants. The humans hate them because they see them as they are suspicious of them, and it there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of racial overtones in it, and because I think that good science fiction, good fantasy takes these modern problems, takes these real life problems, and puts them through a lens of humans, fairies and half fairies, of monsters and that, and puts them through a lens that you can look at them in a different way. Like, Star Trek always did that. They put modern racial problems into fun space exploration. So it's that's part of it, and and it's also a part of, I want to create a world that I want to live in, create a world that's equal, where everybody has the choice and the right to do what they want to do, to become the person that they can be, to be given all those opportunities, not be held back by who they are, what color their skin is, what sex they are. So that's one of the things that I'm writing about in my books, is trying to be the best person you can, to follow that path wherever it leads, and to figure out, and again, to figure out what that path is, and what you want to do, and who you want to walk that path with.
Very well said, Mr. Joel. How do you think your book stands out in its genre or category?
It, I'm not sure, really. I call my books epic fantasy. Some people have called it not quite that. Some people have called it with a tinge of cozy fantasy, but I don't think it really fits in there. There's moments of it, of people traveling and talking and having quiet moments. It's not all running and fighting and battles. So I, I think it stands out in a way that crosses genres and crosses these little subgenres of fantasy. That it can be epic, it can be full of magic, it can be full of exciting things, but it also is full of character moments and people sitting and talking and writing and talking and being and figuring out where they are in their lives, and figuring out where they go next, and making mistakes and figuring out and learning from those mistakes. So I call it epic fantasy, and I think that's probably the best genre to start out with. But it's got tastes of other things in it too. So I think it stands on its own. Some people have commented that this is fantasy for people who don't like fantasy, because it's not really full of strange names and strange places. So it's kind of easy to get into. I would say, at least I hope so.
Yes, definitely. So, Servants of the Moon and Sun, what kind of readers do you believe will connect most with your book and why?
I think it's people who are looking for more from their fantasy than swinging swords and just casting spells, and looking for a little bit more depth in it, looking for really good characters, and looking for really good conversations, because dialogue is something I really focus on. There's not pages and pages of descriptions. It's really that. So that's because that's what interests me. It's people talking and figuring out the world as they go through it, and figuring out the world as they can, and showing them the world through the character's eyes, and not just holding up a camera to that world and showing you, here's this, here's this, here's this. So I want it. and people, I think my readers are readers who appreciate the world building because it's done very subtly, but it's also very, I think it's done very well. At least a lot of people have said it is done very well. And I think also readers who want strong female characters because Talia is, it's the first two books are pretty much it's all female led. It's all women. It's all women, and I think we don't get enough of that as readers. We don't get enough of that in fantasy because a lot of times the women are, set aside as healers, as just secondary characters. But in my books, they're all the main characters, and there are very in the first few books, in the first two books, there are very few named male characters, and I mean that was done very very deliberately. It's not I, it's not. I kind of lost my train of thought there. Um, I do that deliberately because I want I want people to see themselves in these characters, and I want people to learn from them and to appreciate and to have fun with these characters and to like
Yes.
them and hate them and be angry at them sometimes when they do stupid things. So, mm,
Have fun and let's empower women all over the world.
yeah.
But before we go on, Mr. Joel, I'm inviting you to visit my website, Food 101, for our podcast, Food 101, our fourth season, people, with Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chef in one of the five-star restaurant in downtown Toronto. So please do visit our website, Food 101. You can see a lot of things over here to make your food delicious. Just like derivatives of vegetable sauce. So how to make those derivatives, the derivatives of tomato sauce and 12 varieties of consomme and a lot more. It's a lot more. And our books are out not only one but 13 volumes, people. Food 101 Volume 1 Basics until 13 is only the books that you need. How to create a delicious food, available on Amazon and leading online bookstores worldwide. So, Mr. Joel, what advice would you give to aspiring authors who are looking to embark on their own writing journey?
I think you need to write what you love. Write the characters you love, write the scenes you love. Don't worry about what the writing rules are. Just write. Write that character, figure out that world, figure out those characters, put them in a situation and just write. And figure in, you need basic grammar and spelling, of course, but the other rules, just write. You'll figure it out later because once you get that, because you can't edit, you can't publish, you can't do anything with a draft until it's done. So finish that book, finish that story, and go from there because you can't, like I said, you can't do anything with something that's unfinished, and you can sit and fiddle with with the first chapter or first couple chapters for years and years and years. And at some point, you just got to realize that I got to finish this. You got to tell a story. So that's the biggest thing I will say in advice, that you'll finish your story.
Very well said, Mr. Joel. And stop procrastinating, people. Right, right, right. If you have
Yep.
the passion to write. So, Mr. Joel, let's talk about one by one of the Servants of the Moon series books. Book one, Thalia, Heir of the Fairy Realm. If you summarize it, what is all about?
It's about Talia, who is the heir to the fairy realm, how she gets in this excuse me, this relationship with Bastille, who's the heir to the human realm, his and their relationship, how it begins, how it grows, and then how it all comes crashing down, and how Talia has to go on the run with her ladies and her soldier guardians as they're being pursued by her evil aunts who are pretty much trying to take over the fairy realm from their sister, the queen. And it's their adventures and how she goes in search of this ancestor of her. Talia goes in this search for this ancestor of hers, who we we know a little bit about him. She's called the Exile Queen, and how she was this fairy queen in the past who was usurped by um, a, a, an ancestor of Talia, and how their lives sort of parallel each other, and how there's all these little clues that Talia and her ladies find as they're on this exile, from the fairy realm, and how they find all these clues that lead to a place of safety where Talia and her ladies and soldiers can find a refuge.
Interesting, Mr. Joel. And book two, Talia on the Shore of the Sea.
It continues the story. Book one ends in a cliffhanger. And some people don't like that, but I really enjoyed that little bit of cliffhanger, because because I wrote the books together, so that was a very good end, a very good separation point. So the book two continues the story as Talia and her ladies. Talia's pregnant now and is trying to find a place to have her baby in peace and safe from the um, conspiracy, both on the fairy side and the human side. And and then after a little bit of peace, a lot of bad things happen, and that drives the plot for the rest of the book, as Talia and her surviving ladies and soldiers, seek to find out what happened, and the parts of the wide-ranging parts of this conspiracy against them directly, and against the fairy realm and the Queen of the Fairies, specifically.
And of course, the book three of Fairy Court in Exile, an epic fantasy novel of civil war.
Yes, the Fairy Court in Exile takes up at the end of book two. The characters. I have a lot of characters. I'll warn you in advance. I have a lot of characters. But there are groups of characters that all set off in different directions. And book three follows the fairies who stay behind at the refuge that Talia and her soldiers have found, called the Exile Queen's Mountain. And it's the beginning of the Fairy Civil War, that the Talia's aunts have usurped the queen, and they've taken control of the palace and the main parts of the fairy realm, and all the other fairies who are still being faithful to the queen have found their way to the Exile Queen's Mountain, and that they're starting to mount a resistance and to fight the false queens, the false sisters, as they're called. And it's the first couple battles of this civil war that will go on to rage for quite a few more years. But this is the first battles. But also, the book is also about mothers and daughters and the relationships between them, the contentious sometimes, the peaceful sometimes, and how sometimes you don't see your daughter as anything more than a child, and how you how that and then realizing that your daughter has grown and surpassed what you wanted her to be. And so it's also that. So it's an adventure story, but it's also stories of mothers and daughters trying to figure out their new relationship in this new world.
Amazing books, Mr. Joel, and
Thank you.
thank you for sharing to the world. So, how has your perspective as an author evolved since the publication of these books?
Excuse me. Um, I think I think I'm getting to be a better writer. My wife is my editor, and we pretty much do everything in house, from the writing, which I do, and the formatting, and she even reads and records and reads and edits all my audiobooks. So all three books are available on audiobook too. My perspective as an author, I think more I think I'm looking at the world in a different way in some ways, that I'm looking for those little bits of things that can inspire me, but also things that, what can I take from this situation that can inspire a story, that can inspire a character? But also I'm realizing as an author how difficult it is really to find an audience, to find those readers, because there's so much out there. As an indie author, there's so many people out there that are writing amazing books, and finding those readers, finding those people who will love your book for what it is and read it and tell you and write reviews and buy every book as it comes. Those are really hard to find, and it's really hard as an author sometimes to write these books in kind of not quite a void, but kind of a silence, and put it out there and then wonder is there anybody else out there who's going to love these characters, love these books as much as I do. And it's frustrating sometimes, but it's also liberating sometimes that I'm going to write what I want. I'm going to write these characters. I'm going to write these stories, and hopefully people will like them. If they don't, I've at least amused myself. I've made myself happy, and moving on from there, and just kind of taking the path as it leads you. That's I can't. That's what I've learned, and I've learned not to worry about rules. I take criticism, but I also take it with a grain of salt, because everybody has their own view of the world, and sometimes that worldview won't mesh with yours, and you can realize not every story is for everybody, and finding those people who your story is their story. That's gold. When you find that reader who really loves your characters, who really loves everything you've done, and can get mad at your characters when they're doing dumb things and making mistakes. Finding that reader, it's really amazing, and have them gush at you and saying, I really love these characters, I really love this one scene. That's gold. That makes it everything worth it.
So, Mr. Joel, can you share any interesting anecdotes or behind the scenes stories related to the creation of Servants of the Moon and Sun?
Hmm, that's a difficult one. All right, there's one scene. Okay, in book one, we meet the Kanan character, and he's there for a couple chapters, then leaves, and he starts a relationship with one of Talia's ladies, and it's and he's a half fairy, so he has to leave the fairy realm, and he leaves them behind and goes on to find himself, and then he comes back in book two, and he and his fairy lover, reunited, and there's this moment when after they've been reunited, they're sitting there, and he pulls out this scroll, and he just unrolls for her, and he's kind of they're both laughing at it and saying, well, every moment that I was away from you, I wrote something, whether it was like a diary entry or just writing about how he misses her, or writing about the things that are happening to him. And it was just it and actually that was inspired to me by this song that I used to listen to all the time when I was a kid. And it's got this one line saying, um, guy is a wanderer, and he comes back and he says, I'll read you all my cards and tell you what I really meant to say. And I took that moment in that song, that I'll show you all this and tell you what I was really trying to say. And it was just that spark of inspiration, taking something and making it your own, taking somebody else's art and adapting it, paying homage to it, and just taking that moment and saying, I really love this moment, I'm going to make this part of my story.
Yes, indeed. Interesting, Mr. Joel. So, how do you see Servants of the Moon and Sun fitting into the broader literary landscape or cultural conventions?
I don't know, really. I think it feeds into the whole indie world now, because as I said, I'm doing this all myself. It's just myself and my wife. We're doing everything in house. I don't have another editor. I don't have a publisher. I don't have an agent, anything like that. So I think it feeds into the whole doing it yourself, self-publishing world, and a lot of people. And it's just growing and growing as people realize that traditional publishing doesn't work for everybody. It works for some people. It works for some people, but it doesn't work for everyone because everyone has their own story and they can tell their own story and a lot of traditional publishing is very limited in the stories you can tell, in the ideas you can present, and with indie publishing, that just goes out the window. It's both the best thing about indie publishing and it's the worst thing about indie publishing. You can do anything you want, and sometimes it's the difference between why should I do something and why not should I do something. So I think that's where I sit in the world of indie publishing because it's a lot of freedom that you can do anything you want. You can create these characters, and you hope that they're going to resonate with other readers.
Yes, well said, Mr. Joel. Lastly, what's next for you as an author?
What's next? Right now, I'm working on a short, well, not quite, kind of a long short story for an anthology I'm going to submit. It's a fantasy heist story that I'm working on. It takes the characters who are in another anthology short story I wrote for publisher Ravens and Roses in a book called Tales Untold, and that story was called The Fairy Soldier's Last Request, and it appears in that book. Tales Untold from Ravens and Roses, and it takes the two characters from there, and it just continues their adventures in this next story. And it's a fantasy heist, and it's them they're stealing something, and everything that happens around that heist. So that's what I'm working on now, but I'm also working on books for and actively editing and adding to books 4 and 5 right now, which are going to be Tales of the Exile Forest. I'm hoping that it will be book 4 and 5 in the series, but it also can be another starting point they'll be self-contained enough that you can start there and you can realize, oh, there's a whole other world on either sides of these books. So we can go from and they can go back and read the first 3 books and move forward reading the next books because I've got some of those also written, at least written, half written.
Well done, Mr. Joel. And can you please invite our listeners to support the Servants of the Moon and Sun and more books to come?
Yes, please. You can find me at my website, servantsofthemoonandsun.com. There you can see links to all my books, all to the Amazon store, to the links to join my mailing list, where it comes out every second and 16th of the month. And it's just a short little email talking about my writing journey, talking about what's going on, a lot of some personal stuff and things that are going on in our lives, cat pictures and that sort of thing. So servantsofthemoonandsun.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at servantsand I'm also on Blue Sky. I think I'm same handle there. I think servants or Joel C. Flanagan-Grannemann. You should be able to find me either way. Those are the only 2 social medias I'm on at the moment. Everything else is just kind of not that great. So we Twitter cannot be great at the time, but I try to maintain a good community around me of authors and other creatives that try to keep the other not so great stuff at bay. So yeah, that's where I am.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Joel Flanagan-Grannemann because if you support him, more epic fantasy to come.
Yeah.
We're looking forward for the book 4 and 5, Mr. Joel, and you are most welcome to come back and talk about it.
Yes, I thank you for inviting me. It's really fun to talk to you.
More to come, people. See you soon.